No one was ever supposed to know this. The receipt itself was a ghost, a fragile brown slip of paper hidden inside the binding of a tax ledger from 1849. It had remained secret for over 170 years, preserved only by dust and institutional silence. On the morning of April 11th, in the humid, mosquito-thick air of Augustine Parish, Louisiana, a transaction occurred that was meant to vanish without a trace. A young man, barely 19, was sold on the courthouse steps. His crime was never officially recorded. The price was 17 cents. A widow, Maeve O'Connell, purchased him. She was a recent immigrant. Her husband lost to fever the year before, and she needed someone to help tend her struggling small plot of land. She saw a boy, nothing more, a bargain born of misfortune she could not understand. She handed over 17 copper pennies, signed the deed with a shaky X, and led him away. She never knew his real name wasn't Kalin. She never knew the crime he was accused of was fabricated, a lie carefully constructed to serve another's agenda. And she certainly never knew whom he had been secretly married to just 3 months prior. How does a story like this vanish from history? What were we never meant to know? The truth was not merely buried in an archive. It was deliberately erased by a man who held the power to bend reality itself. He didn't simply want the boy broken. He wanted him erased, reduced to a footnote on a receipt for 17 cents. A human life valued less than a handful of nails. The silence that followed wasn't accidental. It was engineered. The man orchestrating this act of cruelty was Judge Alistair Finch. In Augustine Parish, his word was not just law, it was scripture. He was a figure carved from granite and shadowed by swamp, his family controlling the parish's legal and financial arteries for 3 generations. His power was absolute, not simply because of his thousands of acres, though he owned vast land, but because he controlled the very definition of truth. He presided over the court, appointed the sheriff, held mortgages on half the businesses in town. To oppose Finch was not merely to risk one's livelihood, it was to risk existence itself. He could strike a man from the voting rolls, erase his credit, seize his property on a technicality long forgotten. He was a king in all but name, and his kingdom was one of suffocating order where every person knew their place. Kalin had been one of Finch's acquisitions, purchased years earlier from a trader passing through from Virginia. Quiet, intelligent, and unnervingly still, he fascinated the judge. Finch saw him not as a person, but as an intricate chess piece, a mind to be molded. He had Kalin educated in secret, taught to read, understand ledgers, even speak a little French. It was a whim, a personal project. The judge enjoyed possessing something no one else could touch, a mind he had cultivated, a soul he believed he had authored. But a mind once opened cannot be fully controlled. Kalin saw the world with a clarity the judge never anticipated, and that clarity brought him to the one person in Augustine Parish he was never supposed to meet as an equal: Genevieve Finch, the judge's only daughter. A whispered rumor from the Gula communities of the coast spoke of shadow marriages, unions between the enslaved and the powerful, consecrated not by law, but by older binding traditions. Kalin's story became one of these secrets. Assigned to the judge's vast, silent library, Kalin met Genevieve, 17, a ghost in her own home, surrounded by wealth but stifled by rigid expectations. Promised to a senator's son, she was meant to secure the Finch family's influence. But her sharp mind and restless heart found a mirror in Kalin. He was not a servant, not property, but the only other person in her world who seemed fully alive. Conversations began in whispers among leather-bound books. He spoke of stars, she spoke of the sea. He shared constellations as understood from African folklore. She read poetry he was forbidden to see. Both were prisoners in a gilded cage, and in that shared confinement, something extraordinary began to grow. It was more than affection. It was a rebellion of the soul. In the dead of winter, beneath the skeletal branches of an ancient live oak, they made a vow. Knowing no priest or law would recognize their union, they found a root doctor named Elizabeth, who practiced traditions older than the parish itself. By candlelight, with words spoken in English and a language the judge would have called pagan, they bound themselves to each other. For a few stolen weeks they existed as husband and wife in a kingdom of two, a fragile shield against the world. But secrets in Augustine Parish rarely stayed hidden. A misplaced book, a lingering glance, a note discovered by a loyal servant, small openings that revealed the truth. How Finch discovered them is lost, but his response was legendary. Not a hot rage, but a cold, silent fury that seemed to suck the air from the room. He didn't confront them directly. He moved his pieces carefully. Genevieve was confined, her books taken, her world narrowed until all she could see was her father's cold face. He explained calmly that she had dishonored her name, her family, and her God. His campaign of psychological warfare was designed to crush her spirit completely. Kaylin's punishment was equally precise. Death would have been too simple. Finch wanted erasure. He needed the boy reduced to such a pitiful state that even Genevieve's memory of him would be tainted with shame. He planted a silver locket, a gift to his daughter, in Kaylin's quarters. The sheriff, entirely loyal to Finch, discovered the theft. Kaylin was dragged from bed at night, never to see Genevieve again. He spent 2 weeks in a damp stone cell, alone, with only rats and silence. The charge read, theft of property valued at $20. Parish law dictated the punishment, a public auction, all legal, all monstrous lies. Finch's pen erased Kaylin from the story, ensuring his daughter's love vanished from the record. The auction took place on April 11th. Humid and heavy air promised a storm later. A small crowd gathered for mundane parish business, livestock, seized equipment. Kaylin was the final lot, hands bound clean, appearing refined as a house slave. The auctioneer, indebted to Finch, began. No mention of Kaylin's intelligence, his literacy, just the charge, the judgment, and the opening bid, 17 cents. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. An enslaved man in his prime could fetch hundreds of dollars, perhaps more. 17 cents was an insult, a signal. The wise understood this was no ordinary sale, a ritual of public shaming orchestrated by unseen hands. To bid was to interfere with power, and no one dared. Then Maeve O'Connell stepped forward. She did not see politics, power, or ritual. She saw a boy she could afford. Her 3-acre land, her debts, her desperation made the choice simple. "I'll take him," she said. The auctioneer, glancing at Finch's window, called it out, voice cracking, 17 cents. The plan had faltered. Finch had designed the day to leave Kaylin unsold, destined for a work farm from which few returned whole. But now a legal bid had been made. Refusing it would violate the very law Finch wielded. "Going once," Bartholomew called, eyes darting to the courthouse window. "Going twice." He paused, giving the universe one final chance to correct this mistake. Nothing happened. The cicadas screamed in the trees, a noise that grated like frayed nerves. "Sold," he finally forced out, slamming the gavel down with a sound that felt both final and deeply wrong. "To the widow O'Connell for 17 cents. Maeve counted the coins carefully, her hand trembling slightly as she dropped them into Bartholomew's sweaty palm. The deed of sale was written by a clerk whose hands moved too fast, as if he wanted the document gone from his possession as quickly as possible. Maeve signed with her mark. The transaction was complete. She had just purchased a human being for the price of a spool of thread. As she led Kaylin away from the courthouse steps, he did not look at her. His eyes were fixed on that second-story window, the one where he knew the judge was watching. Their eyes met for a brief, scorching moment across the square. In that look, 1,000 unspoken things were exchanged. The judge's stare was one of cruel triumph, a silent message that said, "See what I have made you." But Kylan's look held something else, not surrender, not hatred, but a terrifying, steady promise. Maeve saw none of this. She was only a poor widow who had made a desperate bargain. She had no idea she had just become the keeper of a ruined king's treasure, the unwilling guardian of a secret that could still burn Augustine Parish to ashes. She was taking him home to her small, dusty cabin, unaware that she had bought a man once married to the daughter of the most powerful man in the county. The cruelest lies are often told in silence. That old saying captured perfectly the atmosphere in the O'Connell cabin during the days that followed. Maeve didn't know what to do with Kylan. He wasn't rebellious, but he was distant. He worked from dawn to dusk, clearing the stubborn, clay-packed soil, his movements precise and tireless. He did everything she asked of him, but his obedience was so complete it was unsettling. He never spoke unless spoken to, and his eyes carried a haunted stillness, as if they saw a world far beyond her understanding. Maeve tried to talk to him. She asked about his life before, and he replied simply, "I was in service, ma'am." When she asked if he had family, he just shook his head. The silence inside the cabin grew heavier than the thick summer air outside. It was a silence filled with all his unspoken memories and her unasked questions. She was a simple, kind-hearted woman. The idea of slavery had always been distant to her, something that happened on grand plantations, not in her small, struggling world. Now it sat at her rough wooden table, breathing and silent. She found herself watching him closely, trying to make sense of the mystery before her. His hands, though roughened by new labor, were not the hands of a man born to the fields. They were long, precise hands. The way he moved, even in tattered clothes, carried a grace that felt strangely out of place. One evening she saw him outside looking up at the stars, his lips moving softly. He wasn't praying, he was naming the stars. The judge, meanwhile, was burning with quiet rage. The widow's interference had ruined the perfect symmetry of his revenge. Kylan was supposed to vanish into the parish work farm, swallowed by a life of slow oblivion. Instead, he was living just 2 miles away, a constant reminder of his daughter's betrayal. Each day that Kylan remained alive was an insult to his power. He became obsessed. He sent the sheriff to ride past the O'Connell place twice a day, silent reminders of his reach. He pressured the general store owner to deny Maeve credit, hoping to starve her out, to force her to sell the boy. But Maeve was tougher than he expected, and the small farming community, who despised the judge's cruelty, began to help her in quiet ways. A sack of flour left on her porch, a few jars of preserves, each gift a small act of rebellion. The judge's frustration grew unbearable. He needed Kylan gone, but quietly. Another public spectacle was impossible. It had to be done in secret, cleanly, with no trace leading back to him. He searched for someone who could act in the shadows, someone who could erase problems as if they had never existed. He found that man in a Cajun tracker named Roe, though some whispered his name as Roch. Roch was a shadow who lived deep in the swamps, rumored to have talents that were not entirely natural. He was a man who found people who didn't want to be found, and for the right price, made sure they stayed that way. Back on the farm, the balance between Maeve and Kylan began to shift. Kylan knew the judge's gaze still followed him, but he began to let fragments of his real self show. It was a dangerous gamble, but he needed an ally, and Maeve was the only one he could trust. One evening he noticed her struggling with her late husband's account book. She could read numbers, but not words. Quietly, he stepped closer. "If I may, ma'am," he said softly, taking the ledger. In a few minutes, the messy pages became clear and ordered, written in his elegant, practiced handwriting. Maeve stared at the page, then at him, stunned. "Where did you learn to do that?" she asked. "The judge valued certain skills," he replied, the faintest trace of irony in his tone. From that day he began helping her more, teaching her how to irrigate the fields better, showing her how to repair tools she thought were beyond saving. He was not simply a worker, he was a craftsman of survival. A fragile, wordless bond began to form between them, not friendship, not yet, but the quiet respect of two souls holding on to the same piece of driftwood in a merciless sea. Maeve started to see him differently, not as 17 cents worth of labor, but as a man of deep, unsettling mystery, and with that realization came fear. Whatever he had done to earn Judge Finch's wrath, it had to be something remarkable. She was harboring not just a man, but a secret. And she began to understand that secrets in Augustine Parish came with a deadly price. An old diary entry from the parish described it best. "Saw the judge's man, Roch, in town today. He does not walk like other men. He glides, silent as a water snake. His eyes are the color of swamp water, and they see everything you wish to hide." That was the man who now began to circle Maeve's small farm. Callan felt his presence before he ever saw him. The woods went too still. The birds stopped singing. Even the insects fell silent. It was the quiet of a hunter closing in. Callan understood immediately. The judge was done waiting. Time was running out. He had one card left to play, one secret he had kept even from Genevieve. Before being captured, he had hidden the only proof of their marriage. Not a document which could be destroyed, but something stronger. He had taken a small book of poetry Genevieve once gave him, and on the inside back cover, using ink made from berries and rust, he had written a short account of their secret vows. He signed his name beside hers, then pricked her finger with a needle and pressed her bloody thumbprint to the page. It was a symbol, a truth that could never be denied. If that book were ever found, it would stain the Finch legacy forever. He had hidden it in the one place the judge would never look, inside the old parish church, tucked behind a loose stone in the fireplace. But Callan couldn't retrieve it himself. He was being watched constantly. He needed someone else, someone unnoticed, someone innocent. So he made a desperate plan. He began drawing in the dirt as he worked, tracing strange shapes with a stick. At first, Maeve thought it was idle doodling. Then she noticed the drawings, maps, not random lines. One evening, as she brought him a cup of water, he didn't look up. He kept tracing a line from a rough sketch of her cabin to a church steeple, then drew a small square inside the church and beside it, the shape of a flame. When he finally looked at her, his eyes held a wordless, pleading message. Maeve felt a knot of fear tighten in her stomach. She knew what he was asking. He wanted her to go to the church, to the fireplace, to retrieve something hidden. Doing that would mean crossing a line she could never return from. She could erase the map with her foot, pretend she hadn't understood, and live her days in quiet obedience. Or she could trust this haunted, mysterious man she'd bought for 17 cents and step into danger. For 2 days, she wavered, sick with fear. But the look in Callan's eyes haunted her. It wasn't the look of a criminal. It was the look of someone trying to save his own soul. On the third night, she made her choice. After he had fallen asleep in the small barn, she slipped from her cabin, lantern in hand. The walk to the church felt endless. Every rustle in the woods sounded like Roch. Every shadow seemed to hold the judge's cold gaze. The church was dark and still. The back door was never locked. She slipped inside, the air cool and smelling of old wood and melted wax. Her fingers searched the stones near the fireplace, trembling. Then she found it. A single loose stone. Using a piece of kindling, she pried it open. Inside the hollow, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small leather-bound book. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped it. She didn't open it. She didn't want to. She only knew this was the thing at the heart of all the danger, the secret worth a man's life. She tucked it into her apron, replaced the stone, and hurried back into the night, the book cold and heavy against her skin. When she reached the farm at dawn, Callan was waiting outside. He wasn't asleep. He was standing guard, watching the road. When he saw the book in her hands, something changed in his eyes. For the first time, she saw relief, deep and raw. He took the book gently, his fingers brushing hers. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't need to thank me," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Just tell me what we do now." Before he could answer, the sharp barking of a dog shattered the quiet. Then another joined in. Callan's head snapped up. His body tensed like drawn wire. "He's here," he said calmly. "Roch." He pushed the book back into her hands. "There's a man, Silas. He works the ferry at Black Creek Crossing. He's an old friend, one of the few the judge doesn't control. Give him this book. Tell him—" He paused, eyes burning. "Tell him the mockingbird is free." Maeve stared at him, confused. "What about you?" "The judge doesn't just want the book," Callan said, already turning toward the dark tree line. "He wants me." Before she could protest, he ran, not toward the road, but straight into the thick woods behind the cabin. A deliberate act of sacrifice. Maeve stood frozen, clutching the book, his strange words echoing in her mind. Then she heard the sound of something moving through the trees, fast, silent, predatory. Maeve turned and ran. She ran faster than she ever had, her lungs burning, the dark forest closing in on every side. She didn't know the paths, stumbled over roots, her face whipped by low branches. She only knew the direction of Black Creek and ran toward it, driven by a terror she had never felt before. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit followed, not clumsy footsteps, but the cold, precise movements of a predator. A snapped twig here, a soft step there, and Callan further ahead, making just enough noise to keep the hunter focused on him, drawing the danger away from her. It became a race against sunrise. She finally emerged onto the muddy banks of Black Creek. The ferry was a simple wooden raft with a pulley system. A stooped man with dark hair stood beside it, preparing for the morning crossing. "Silas!" she gasped, stumbling toward him. The man looked up, eyes sharp and alert. He took in her torn dress, her frantic expression, the book clutched tightly in her hand. "Are you Silas?" she repeated, her voice urgent. "I am," he replied, his low voice calm but strong. "Callan sent me," she panted, offering the book. "He said to give you this. He said, the mockingbird is free." Silas's weathered face showed no surprise. He accepted the book with steady hands, his expression grave. He understood the meaning. Callan was enacting the last, most desperate phase of their plan. He likely would not survive the night. He had chosen to sacrifice himself to ensure the truth endured. From across the creek, a sharp cry echoed through the morning mist, abruptly cut off. Maeve flinched, her blood turning cold. She knew it was Callan. Silas's jaw tightened. "Get on the ferry," he said urgently. Without waiting further, he untied the rope and began pulling them across the swirling water, his old muscles straining with the effort. As they reached the middle of the creek, they saw him. Rock the tracker emerged from the tree line on the opposite bank, holding a long, wicked-looking knife, its blade darkened. He watched the ferry with a face of cold frustration. He was too late. Maeve stared at the man who had hunted and likely killed the boy she had bought for 17 cents. A wave of nausea and grief struck her, bending her knees. She had been a pawn in a game she barely understood, and people were dying because of it. "What happens now?" she whispered, her voice raw. Silas did not look at her. His gaze stayed fixed on the far bank, daring the tracker to try crossing. "Now," he said, his voice heavy with weary sorrow, "the judge loses." He lifted the book from his coat, holding it up for Maeve to see across the water, a gesture of defiance, a promise that this story would not end in silence. Rock melted back into the woods, his mission both accomplished and incomplete. They reached the opposite bank, a land that felt like a different country, beyond the immediate reach of the judge. Silas secured the ferry and led Maeve to a small hidden cabin nearby. Inside, an oil lamp cast a warm glow over the simple room. Silas placed the book on the table with reverence. "You are safe here, for now," he said. "Who are you?" Maeve finally asked. "I knew Kaylin's mother," Silas began, his voice low, confessional. "Years ago, before the judge bought her. We were from the same place in Virginia. I promised her I would look out for her son. I failed. I stood by, afraid of what the judge could do. Kaylin knew I ran this ferry. He knew I had connections to people who helped others disappear, the Underground Railroad. He reached out weeks before this, fearing the judge knew his secret. We made a desperate plan. Getting him out was one thing, but he refused to leave without proof. Without this book." He tapped the cover. "A man's life is temporary, but truth can endure if someone is brave enough to protect it." He finally looked at her, eyes full of sorrow. He didn't expect to survive. He made Silas promise that if he sent the signal, the book would reach the North at all costs. He sacrificed himself so that one day everyone would know what the judge did to his own daughter. Maeve broke down. Tears she had held for weeks finally came, grief for a boy she barely knew but whose courage had reshaped her world. She wept for his lost life, for the injustice of it all. Silas remained silent, a respectful witness to her sorrow. When she was spent, her body aching from sobs, she looked at the book. "His wife," she said softly. "The judge's daughter. What happened to her?" Silas's face hardened. "After the judge locked her away, he brought in a doctor from New Orleans, a specialist in female hysteria. They declared her unfit, a danger to herself. She was sent to an asylum in Mobile, a place meant for being forgotten. She became a prisoner, just like Kaylin. The judge didn't just take her husband. He took her mind, her freedom, her name. As far as the world knows, Genevieve Finch had a nervous breakdown and was sent away. It is neat, clean, and utterly false. The cruelty was breathtaking. He didn't just erase Kaylin, he erased his own daughter, turning her into a ghost long before death." Now Maeve understood the 17 cents, the auction, the tracker. It was part of a meticulous plan of control, and she, the unwitting widow, had stumbled onto it and ruined the final act. "What's in the book?" she whispered. Silas opened it carefully, turning to the inside back cover. There, in Kaylin's elegant script, was the story of their secret marriage. Below it, 2 marks, Kaylin's signature and a brown-red smudge, a bloody thumbprint. "Genevieve's mark," Silas said softly. "Proof she entered the vow willingly. In the right hands, this book destroyed the judge's narrative. It proved he manufactured the theft charge and institutionalized his daughter to cover up what he could not face. My contacts will get this to abolitionist publishers in Philadelphia. It will be printed. The story will be told. It won't bring Kaylin back. It might not free Genevieve, but it will crack the judge's throne, a fire he can never fully extinguish." He looked at Maeve, serious. "But you cannot return to Augustine Parish. The judge will never stop searching. You are the loose end, the witness who knows the full truth." Maeve thought of her farm, her husband's grave. It was all gone, erased by a history she never chose. She was a refugee from a secret war. "Where will I go?" she asked. "North," Silas said. "We'll get you to a safe place, a new life, the least we can do, what he would have wanted." Maeve disappeared, aided by Silas and the Underground Railroad network. She traveled by night, hiding in barns and secret rooms, moving steadily north until Louisiana was only a memory. She changed her name, cut her hair, and became someone else, a woman without a past. The book traveled with her, a sacred relic, passed from hand to hand until it reached Philadelphia. In 1850, an anonymous pamphlet circulated, "A Parish of Lies." It told the story of a powerful Southern judge, his daughter, and the educated slave he destroyed to protect his family's name. Names were omitted, but details made it clear. The mainstream press dismissed it as propaganda, but the seed of truth had been planted. The judge's power, once absolute, now had boundaries. He became paranoid, seeing betrayal in every shadow, spending a fortune hunting a ghost. Truth, once released, could not be captured. Judge Alistair Finch died in 1863, not in battle, but of a stroke alone in his grand library. Genevieve remained in the asylum until 1888, silent and detached. Rock the Tracker vanished into the swamps. A report in 1854 claimed his body was found in a bayou, cause of death listed as alligator attack. Rumors suggested someone finally settled the debt from Black Creek. Silas continued his quiet life, ferrying people to freedom. Kalen's body was never recovered. Rock likely buried him in an unmarked grave deep in the swamp, another soul absorbed by Louisiana's dark soil. The record was erased, just as the judge had intended. But the story he gave his life to protect did not vanish. It lived on quietly, becoming a whispered legend among those who remembered. It proved that a person could be silenced, but an idea could never truly die. You can bury a body, but you cannot bury the truth forever. The widow, Maeve, who lived into old age in a small town in Ohio, never spoke openly about what had happened. Yet people say she kept a small, worn pamphlet in a locked box until her final days. It was the story of the boy she had bought for 17 cents. The boy who secretly became a husband, a rebel, a kind of king in a world that refused to acknowledge him. If you visit Augustine Parish today, there is no official record of any of this. The Finch family name still stands on the courthouse and the library. History, as it is officially written, is the story of the victors. But if you walk down to Black Creek Crossing, some of the older residents might tell you another version. They speak of a ghost wandering the woods, searching for a book. They talk of a love stronger than the law, and of a truth that cost everything. If you have followed this story this far, comment "The Mockingbird is free" below. You are no longer just observing a story. You have become a keeper of it, a witness to a history deliberately erased. It is a heavy weight to carry, knowing something meant to be forgotten. The receipt for 17 cents now rests in a university archive, catalogued as a historical curiosity. Most who see it only see a strange, tragic transaction from a cruel time. They notice the price and shake their heads at the injustice, but they do not know the story behind the ink. They cannot see the ghost of a hidden marriage, the cold fury of a powerful judge, or the extraordinary courage of a woman who trusted a stranger. Those 17 pennies were not merely the price of a boy, they were the cost of love and rebellion. To most, it is just a receipt for a slave, but to those who see deeper, it is a declaration of defiance, fought in whispers, hidden texts, and in the hearts of those who refuse to be erased. It reminds us that the most important histories often leave the faintest marks. They must be uncovered, protected, and remembered. They are histories that powerful men tried to bury under the weight of laws and lies. The system that allowed a man like Judge Finch to act as he did was more than just law. It was a psychological prison. It treated people as objects, assigning value only as their owners saw fit. The actions of Kalen and Genevieve were not crimes of theft or simple love. Their transgression was the belief that they were equals. Their rebellion lay in seeing each other fully as human beings. That was the one sin the judge and the society he embodied could not tolerate. Because if a slave and the daughter of a master could be husband and wife, bound by a vow beyond law and property, the foundation of that world crumbled. Power would be shown as a construct, social order as a fragile illusion, and the chains that bound bodies were mirrored in the minds of the enslavers. The judge had to destroy them, not only to punish them, but to protect the reality he had built for himself. His cruelty was not just revenge, it was an act of desperate self-preservation, an attempt to kill a truth that threatened to reveal him as a fraud, ruling over a kingdom of ghosts. Think of the widow Maeve. She may be the most significant figure in the story. She was not a hero nor an activist. She was an ordinary person facing an extraordinary choice. What would you do in her place? Would you turn away from injustice, fearful of the consequences? Would you convince yourself it was none of your concern? Most would. That quiet, terrible apathy is what allows evil to endure. But Maeve, a poor, uneducated widow with nothing to her name, made a choice. She chose to see the man, not the slave. She chose to trust when fear might have paralyzed her. She chose action. Her simple, brave act, running through the woods with a book she could barely read, was more powerful than all the judge's laws, wealth, and rage combined. She did not just save a book. She preserved a truth. She became the unlikely vessel for a story that was never meant to survive. A final, unsettling rumor lingered about Genevieve Finch. Some of the older nurses at the mobile asylum used to tell of the silent woman in room 213. Each year, on the anniversary of the April 11th auction, she would draw a single image on the wall, sometimes with charcoal, sometimes with her own blood. It was always the same image, a mockingbird with its throat cut. Staff would scrub it away, trying to erase the strange memorial. Yet the next year, it would appear again. A silent tribute to a love silenced, a message to a world that had forgotten. It was her final act of rebellion, a memory that refused to die. Despite her father's cruelty and decades of institutional oppression, the love she held for Kaylin remained, buried but unbroken. It was a story written on prison walls, told in silence and in blood, a testament to the man she married, the man the world tried to reduce to a 17-cent ghost.